She said it was just for a while. 7 years, 7 long, hungry years, passed before I saw her again. When I opened my door that morning, the sun behind her made her look almost ghostly. She was standing there in white, holding a small bouquet like time hadn't moved at all. Her voice trembled when she said my name, Elias. I thought I'd forgotten that sound. She told me she waited for me. That she never stopped believing I'd come back. And for a second, a cruel, fleeting second, my heart almost believed her. Then my little girl came running from the living room, clutching her crayons, her tiny voice bright and innocent. "Daddy, who's that?" Clara froze. Her bouquet slipped from her hand. The petals scattered at her feet like the years she'd thrown away. And all I could say was, "Someone I used to know." I grew up in a small town where time moved slower than the wind through the wheat fields. My world was simple: early mornings, calloused hands, the scent of soil and sunlight. I never imagined that love could come dressed in city perfume and high heels. But then came Clara. She arrived that summer, all brightness and confidence, studying architecture at the university in town. I first saw her sketching the old bridge near the river. Her hair kept falling into her face as she worked, and every time she brushed it aside, she smiled at the world like it belonged to her. I remember thinking, she didn't look like she belonged in my world. But she noticed me anyway. It started small. She'd buy vegetables from my mother's stall at the market, asking too many questions about the farm, laughing when I'd fumble for words. Then, one evening, she asked me to walk her home. That became our thing. The city lights would fade behind us, and the stars above the countryside would spill open. She'd talk about her dreams, how she wanted to design buildings that stood for something. I'd listen, nodding, pretending to understand the language of ambition and glass towers. I didn't have dreams like hers. Mine were simpler: a small home, a quiet life, maybe her hand in mine forever. Clara said I made her feel real. That I grounded her. I didn't realize back then that was her way of saying I was temporary. We became inseparable. I'd sneak out before sunrise to bring her fresh bread, or she'd surprise me at the fields with her sketchbook. She'd sit on a haystack, sketching me as I worked, saying, "You look like something from an old painting." I'd laugh and tell her, "You'll make me sound like a ghost one day." She'd just smile, eyes soft, and whisper, "Maybe I will." Her family, though, they didn't smile. The first time I met them, her father didn't even shake my hand. Her mother only looked at my worn boots and said, "Clara, dear, he's very humble." I understood what that meant. Too poor. Too small. Too ordinary. But Clara took my side, at least, that's what she said. "They don't understand, Elias," she whispered one night under the old oak near the river. "You have something they'll never see, heart." That word, heart, kept me alive for years. We made plans. A little house by the stream. She'd draw it, I'd build it. She'd talk about our children like she could already hear their laughter echoing through the fields. I believed every word, because why wouldn't I? She was my world. Then, one evening, she brought it up. The opportunity. Her uncle owned farmland farther south, a place I'd never been. He needed someone reliable to oversee it for a while. She said it'd be temporary, just a few months. I could earn more, save money, and show her parents I was serious. I hesitated. I didn't want to leave her. But she cupped my face, eyes shimmering in the lantern light, and said, "Elias, don't you see? This is our chance. When you come back, they'll have to respect you. We'll have everything we dreamed of." She spoke with that soft, urgent conviction that made me forget to question. So I agreed. The night before I left, she came to the bus stop with a small box wrapped in blue paper. Inside was a sketch, our little house, with her handwriting beneath it. "For when you return." She kissed me and whispered, 7 months. Promise me you'll write. I promised. I didn't know that 7 months would turn into 7 years. As the bus rolled out of the city, I looked out the window, holding that drawing like a sacred thing. She stood on the platform, waving until the dust swallowed her silhouette. I thought it was love. I didn't realize it was goodbye. The countryside she sent me to was nothing like home. It wasn't peaceful, it was lonely. The morning started before dawn, the mist clinging to the fields like ghosts of promises, and by the time the sun dipped behind the hills, I'd already written a letter to Clara in my head. At first, I sent them every week. Pages filled with little things, how the crops were growing, how much I missed her laughter, how I'd saved enough to buy her a gold bracelet next time I came home. I told her about the stars here, how they seemed to burn closer to the earth, how I wished she could see them. For a while, she wrote back. Her letters smelled faintly of her perfume, neat handwriting curling across the paper. She'd write. I'm proud of you, Elias. You're doing great. Just focus on your future. I'm waiting. Those words used to fill me with strength. But over time, something changed. Her letters grew shorter, then fewer. No scent. No warmth. Just ink and distance. I told myself it was because she was busy. City life, studies, family. I didn't want to believe what my gut whispered during the quiet nights, that I was being forgotten. Months became a year. I still sent money home, every envelope sealed with hope. Sometimes I'd get a response. Sometimes not at all. Then came the rumors. A letter from my old friend, Jonah, who still lived in the city, read. Saw Clara the other day. She looked happy, real happy. She was with that guy, Darren, the one her family likes. Maybe it's just business stuff, but, be careful, brother. I folded that letter so tightly my hands shook. Darren. I remembered him. The man who used to visit her house in sleek suits, driving cars that smelled like leather and arrogance. She'd told me he was just a family friend, like a brother. I told myself Jonah was mistaken. People love to talk. People love to ruin good things. So I kept working. Each day, I forced myself to believe that love was stronger than distance. I'd whisper her name under my breath when exhaustion pulled at my bones. The idea of her kept me alive. Then, after almost 2 years, she came to visit. I still remember that day like it was painted into my skin. The workers on the farm went silent when she arrived, stepping out of a black car, wearing sunglasses, her hair tied neatly back, city grace radiating from her. Elias, she said softly when she saw me. Her voice had a strange edge, polite but not warm. I was covered in dirt, sweat on my brow. I wanted to run to her, hold her, but something in her eyes stopped me. We spent the evening together. I took her to see the hills where I worked, the place where I planned to build us a home one day. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She kept checking her phone, fingers twitching like she was waiting for someone else to call. So, she said as we watched the sunset. How much have you saved? That question shouldn't have hurt, but it did. I told her the amount. Enough for a start, not enough for a dream. She sighed. You're doing well, Elias. Just, don't lose focus. You're almost there. You just need to trust me. Trust. That word again. It had once sounded like love. Now it sounded like distance. That night, after she'd gone to bed in the guest room, I sat outside by the barn, unable to sleep. Her perfume still lingered in the air, sweet and suffocating. The cicadas buzzed, the stars burned above me, and something inside me twisted. I told myself I was being paranoid. That she wouldn't come all this way if she didn't care. That love doesn't vanish like smoke. But then I heard her voice. Faint, behind the thin wooden wall. Muffled by laughter. He still believes me. My heart stopped. Her tone was soft, amused, the same tone she used when teasing me years ago. Then a pause, and her whisper, low and tender. You worry too much. He's harmless. He'll never suspect a thing. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. I could hear the faint hum of a man's voice on the other end of the line, distant but unmistakably intimate. My mind refused to accept it. I told myself I was misunderstanding, that it wasn't what it sounded like. But deep down, I knew. I stayed outside until the stars faded. When she came out in the morning, her smile was bright, practiced. She said she had to go back early for a project. I didn't mention the phone call. I just nodded. She hugged me lightly, her arms barely touching. Don't forget why you're doing this, she said. For us, I replied. She smiled. Yes. For us. But her eyes looked past me, as if already somewhere else. When her car drove away, I stood in the dirt road until the dust settled. My chest felt hollow, but my mind clung to denial like a drowning man to driftwood. Love, I told myself, isn't perfect. Maybe she's under pressure. Maybe her family's forcing her. Maybe I'm not enough yet. That was the thought that haunted me most. So I buried the doubt. I worked harder. I saved more. Every cut, every scar, every sleepless night, I told myself it was proof of my love. Proof that when I came back, she'd see. But something had changed inside me that night. The trust that once came so easily now carried weight. Every unanswered letter felt heavier, every delay sharper. Still, I refused to hate her. Not yet. Because hope is the cruelest kind of loyalty. And I was still loyal. 7 years. That's how long it took for me to finally stop counting the days. At first, I told myself I'd go back when I had enough, money, reputation, something to prove to her family. But the truth was, I stayed because I was afraid. Afraid of what I might find if I returned too soon. For the first 5 years, I kept writing to her. Letters full of longing, of stories from the countryside. I told her about harvests, storms, nights when the moon looked like a scar above the fields. I told her how I still dreamed of her every night. For the last 2 years, there was silence. No letters. No replies. Not even a whisper. At first, I thought maybe she'd moved. Or her family was hiding my letters. Maybe her father burned them before she could see them. That's what I wanted to believe. But when the silence became normal, something inside me cracked. I stopped writing. I poured everything into my work instead, managing the land, learning how to grow something that would last longer than love. And then, one morning, I woke up and realized I couldn't stay away anymore. I packed a small bag, left the farm in my foreman's hands, and took the first bus back to the city. The roads had changed. The buildings looked taller, shinier, colder. My hands, rough and sunburned, didn't belong here anymore. But my heart beat faster with every street I passed. I still carried the same folded drawing she'd given me, the one of our dream house, faded at the edges. When I reached her family's house, the old gate was still there, though the paint had peeled. I hesitated before knocking, my chest tightening with both fear and foolish hope. A maid opened the door. She didn't recognize me. "Is Clara home?" I asked. She blinked. "You mean Miss Clara?" "She doesn't live here anymore, sir." My throat went dry. "Where is she?" The maid's eyes softened, almost pitying. "She's getting married next week. To Mr. Darren Holbrook." The name hit like a stone. Darren. I thanked her and walked away before she could see my face crumble. I found them by accident, or maybe fate wanted me to. There was an engagement party that night at a downtown hotel, lights glowing through the glass walls like stars trapped in cages. I stood outside in the rain, staring through the windows. Clara looked radiant, older, more refined. Her laughter filled the room as she leaned close to Darren. His hand rested on her waist like it belonged there. 7 years ago, she'd told me to trust her. Now she was smiling in another man's arms. I didn't realize I'd stepped inside until I was standing at the edge of the hall. People turned, confused. Clara froze mid-sentence when she saw me. Her smile vanished. "Elias," she whispered, disbelief spreading across her face. I didn't know what to say. My clothes were wet, my hands trembling. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, her friends, her family, Darren. "I finally managed, you said you'd wait." Her expression changed, somewhere between guilt and annoyance. She set down her glass and walked over. "Elias, this isn't the time. I wrote to you. For years. You never answered." She sighed, like I was a child clinging to a story he didn't understand. "It was for your own good," she said quietly. "You needed to grow up. To see the world isn't built on dreams and promises. You wouldn't have listened otherwise. For my good." My voice cracked. "You sent me away to prove myself, and while I was breaking my back trying, you moved on." Her gaze hardened. "You don't understand how things work here. Darren can offer stability, respect. He's the kind of man my family needs in our lives. You're still chasing fields and fantasies." I laughed bitterly. "I worked every day for you. Every sunrise, every blister, I thought of you. You were my reason." She looked away. "And look how far it got you." Something inside me went quiet then. Not anger. Not sadness. Just emptiness. The kind that comes when you finally stop fighting what's already dead. Darren came over, resting his hand protectively on her back. "Maybe it's time you left, friend," he said, his tone polite but sharp. Friend. That word burned more than anything else. I turned without another word and walked out. The rain had stopped, but I didn't notice. My reflection in the dark windows looked like a stranger, mud-stained, weary, broken. I left the city that night. No letters. No explanations. I didn't even go home at first. I just disappeared. For months, I worked without rest. I poured my pain into the land, every betrayal became another row of crops, every heartbreak another sunrise I refused to waste. And then, one day, my body gave out. It was a fever at first, then pneumonia. I remember collapsing in the field, the sky spinning above me. When I woke, I was in a small clinic, surrounded by white walls and the faint smell of antiseptic. A woman was sitting beside me, reading a worn paperback. She looked up, smiled gently, and said, "You scared us." That was Lena. She was nothing like Clara. Her kindness wasn't loud, it didn't demand to be seen. She talked to me like I mattered, even when I had nothing left to give. When I apologized for being a burden, she only said, "Everyone needs care sometimes. Even those who think they don't." She brought me soup, helped me walk again, and laughed when I tried to act tougher than I was. Somehow, her laughter didn't sting, it healed. Over time, I started helping her with small things around the clinic, fixing fences, painting walls. It wasn't much, but it gave me something to wake up for. Months became years again, but this time, they didn't feel wasted. I built something real, a small agricultural cooperative with local farmers. I taught them what I'd learned, and they taught me patience, resilience. The business grew faster than I expected. Soon, my name started to mean something in the region. The same, simple, man Clara once looked down on now owned hectares of thriving farmland and employed dozens of workers. I didn't plan to fall in love again. But love isn't something you plan. Lena and I married quietly under the old oak tree near the fields. The same tree where Clara once told me I had heart. I didn't think about her that day. I just thought about how different Lena's hand felt in mine, steady, certain, warm. 2 years later, our daughter was born. We named her Iris. Her first word was, Papa. The first time she called me that, something in me finally let go. The ache that had lived in my chest for years faded into a memory. And in that peace, I found a strange kind of revenge, the kind that doesn't need fire or fury. Just growth. Because every day I lived well, I lived proof that Clara was wrong. I didn't need her world. I built my own. Years passed. My name started appearing in business circles, even in city newspapers. One day, a journalist wrote an article about Elias Ward, the man who turned forgotten farmland into gold. I laughed when I read it. Gold was never what I wanted. But I suppose people measure success in strange currencies. Sometimes, I'd see Clara's name in social columns, her husband Darren's company growing fast, then slowly sinking under rumors of corruption and debt. I didn't read too closely. I'd already buried that part of my life. Lena and I built our home by the stream, the one I once promised to Clara. Only this time, it was real. Every brick, every corner, filled with laughter that didn't need pretending. Every night, when Iris fell asleep, I'd sit by the window, look out over the fields, and whisper a quiet thank you, to fate, to loss, to the pain that had shaped me. Because without her betrayal, I never would have found this peace. And though I didn't realize it yet, life wasn't done circling back. Because one day soon, the past I thought I'd buried was going to knock on my door, dressed in white, holding flowers, asking for forgiveness I no longer needed. I've always believed revenge is something people plan in the dark, fueled by rage and sleepless nights. But mine didn't come from hate. It came quietly, like rain on the roof, steady and inevitable. I never wanted to hurt Clara. For a long time, I didn't even want to think about her. I'd built a life far away from the noise of her world, a home where my daughter laughed, where my wife hummed as she cooked, where the mornings smelled like earth and bread instead of perfume and regret. But life has its own cruel poetry. It started with a headline. I was having coffee one morning, reading the local paper, when her name caught my eye. Heartbreak Industries faces fraud investigation. The article mentioned Darren, her husband. Allegations of embezzlement, unpaid taxes, falsified contracts. A scandal big enough to swallow everything he'd built. At first, I skimmed it. It felt distant, like reading about a stranger. But when I saw her name, Clara Heartbreak, co-director, my hands stilled on the paper. There was a picture. She was leaving a courthouse, face pale, eyes down, reporters shouting her name. She looked older. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something brittle. I folded the paper, set it aside, and went back to work. But that night, when the fields were quiet and Lena was asleep, I found myself thinking of her again. Not with anger. Not even sadness. Just wonder. How easily time can turn the world upside down. A few months later, the news turned darker. Darren's company went bankrupt. The creditors came next, seizing assets, selling off properties, including the one that had once been Clara's family estate. I hadn't seen that house in years, but I remembered every inch of it, the high walls, the marble floors, the cold eyes that looked down on me the first time I stepped inside. When my accountant brought me the auction notice, I almost laughed. "Mr. Ward," he said carefully, "this property would be an excellent investment. Fertile land, strategic location. We can buy it through a holding company, keep it quiet." I looked at the photograph on the document. The old estate, cracked and fading, surrounded by overgrown gardens. "Yes," I said softly. "Buy it." He nodded. "In your name?" "No. Anonymously." He raised an eyebrow but didn't ask questions. When the deal was finalized, I visited the estate alone. It felt smaller than I remembered. The grandeur was gone. The gate hung crooked on rusted hinges. Inside, The walls smelled of dust and decay. In the main hall, the chandelier had fallen and shattered years ago, crystals scattered like broken promises. I stood there for a long time, my footsteps echoing. This was where her mother had called me humble. Where her father had shaken his head at my dreams. Where Clara had once held my hand in secret, whispering, "They'll see one day, Elias. We'll make them see." Now it all belonged to me. Not because I'd wanted revenge. But because I'd built something real, while they'd built something hollow. That was the first time I understood the kind of justice life delivers, not in anger, but in symmetry. I didn't see her again until the following spring. It was a warm day. The fields were golden, stretching as far as the eye could see. I was meeting a group of contractors about a land development project, a collaboration with an architecture firm from the city. When I arrived at the main office, one of my assistants said, "Sir, the firm's representative is waiting for you." I stepped inside the meeting room. And there she was. Clara. She stood by the window, a folder in her hand, her hair tied back in that same precise knot she used to wear in college. But she wasn't the same. There were faint lines near her eyes, her smile forced, her confidence dimmed. She turned, and froze. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. "Elias," she breathed. My name sounded foreign on her lips. I smiled politely, like greeting an old acquaintance. "Ms. Holbrook." Her mouth parted slightly. You own this land?" I nodded. "My company does." She swallowed. I didn't know. I was sent by my firm to propose a design for your expansion project. I didn't realize. "It's fine," I said evenly. "Let's discuss your proposal." Her composure faltered. She looked at me the way a drowning person looks at shore, so close, yet unreachable. We sat down across from each other, a table between us where 7 years of silence once lived. As she explained the project, her voice trembled slightly. She used to speak with conviction, with charm. Now, she was just trying to hold herself together. When she finished, I said, "The design is solid. But I'll have to review it with my team." She nodded quickly. "Of course. Thank you for Clara." Her eyes lifted to mine. I leaned back. "You don't have to pretend with me." Her breath hitched. "I'm not pretending." "Yes, you are." The silence stretched. She looked down at her hands, then back up, tears brimming. "I waited for you," she whispered. Those words, soft, trembling, should have broken me once. But now they only echoed hollowly. I tilted my head. "Waited? You were married when I came back." Her voice cracked. "It wasn't what you think. My family, Darren, he said he'd help my father's business. I thought I was doing the right thing." I studied her. "And sending me away? Was that the right thing too?" Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I thought I was helping you. I wanted you to become someone they couldn't look down on. I thought, when you come back, we'll start over." I almost pitied her then. Almost. "Clara," I said quietly, "you sent me away to build myself." "I did. Just not for you." Her face crumpled. "Elias, please, you have no idea what it's been like. After everything fell apart, Darren, the scandal, I lost everything. I lost everyone. And when I heard your name again in the papers, I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd still remember me." "I did," I said. "But only as a lesson." She looked at me like she didn't understand. "A lesson?" I nodded. "That love without respect is a slow death. That some people only see your worth once they need it." Her shoulders shook. "You hate me." I met her gaze calmly. "No. I don't hate you. Hate takes energy. You're just someone I used to know." For a long time, she said nothing. Just sat there, eyes distant, like trying to recognize herself through my indifference. When she finally stood, she whispered, "You've changed." I had to. She tried to smile, but it faltered halfway. "You got everything you wanted." I looked past her, through the window, at the land stretching endlessly under the sun. My workers moving through the fields, the hum of machines, the quiet pulse of a life I'd built with my own hands. "No," I said softly. "I got what I needed." After she left, I stood alone in the room for a while, letting the silence settle. I thought I'd feel triumphant, maybe vindicated. But all I felt was peace. Cold, steady peace. Later that week, my assistant informed me that Clara had resigned from her firm. No forwarding address. No calls. She disappeared as quietly as she had once broken me. That night, when I came home, Lena was sitting by the fire with Iris on her lap, both laughing at some silly storybook. I stood there for a long moment, just watching them. My daughter's laughter was pure and bright, untouched by the world's cruelty. When Lena noticed me, she smiled. "You're late. Long day." I smiled back, hanging my coat. No longer than it needed to be. She kissed my cheek. "Dinner's ready." As I held her hand and walked toward the table, I realized something. Revenge wasn't always about destruction. Sometimes, it was about standing so far above the ruins that the people who once looked down on you couldn't even reach your shadow anymore. And that was enough. Because in the end, the best revenge isn't anger. It's indifference. It's peaceful. And that, finally, was mine. I didn't plan a spectacle. I didn't want one. I wanted the smallest, quietest thing that could hurt, if hurt is what it was. So I invited her to dinner. Not to gloat. Not to parade my life in front of her. Just dinner. A polite meeting, the kind you have with a former client or an old colleague. The sort of ordinary thing that makes extraordinary wounds look ridiculous. She accepted, voice thin and hesitant. "You want to talk business?" she asked. "Partly," I said. "Partly to catch up. I thought, if you've come that far to apologize, maybe we could close the circle." She arrived at dusk, hands slightly trembling, dress sensible and modest, no city armor this time. The papers had taught her humility, the papers had a way of stripping people until only the parts they actually were left. Lena met her at the door. I don't think Clara expected anyone else. She certainly didn't expect a small, dark-haired woman with tired eyes to open the door and reach for Clara's coat with a practiced, unbothered kindness. Nor did she expect the little girl who followed the woman, skipping, clutching a crayon-smudged drawing, hair in a haphazard braid, cheeks still warm from play. Clara's face changed in a way I'll never forget. First confusion. Then something like recognition. Then the slow, terrible sinking that only comes when a person realizes the world has continued without them. "Elias," she said, uncertain. "Clara." I kept my voice even. That was the hardest part, making it sound nothing like the voice that had once begged and pleaded and swore she'd wait. Calm. Polite. Civil. Lena stepped forward and extended her hand. "I'm Lena," she said, her voice soft. "It's nice to finally meet you." Clara looked from Lena to the little girl, then to me, as if searching for a trap. She glanced at the child. "Is she?" "She's Iris," I said. Saying the name out loud felt like closing a book and setting it on the shelf. "This is our home." The child, tiny, blithe, all teeth and sunlight, ignored the tension in the room and made a beeline for Clara, thrusting the crumpled paper into her hands with the frankness only a child possesses. "Mama, can I show her my drawing?" she asked. For a single heartbeat the world narrowed to that one sentence. Mama. The word had once been a dream. It had been a promise I'd whispered to myself at midnight, the way one feeds a starving thing with hope. Hearing it now, followed by a question from the mouth of the little girl I had built a life with, was like watching a door close gently and forever. Clara's hands tightened around the paper as if it might be fragile. Tears rose to her eyes, raw, unreckoned. She hadn't expected to be put in that place. She hadn't expected to be shown, so simply and without malice, everything she'd been missing. Iris looked between Clara and me, then giggled. "Do you like purple?" she asked, oblivious to all the history that had dragged them into the same room. Clara couldn't answer. She only looked at Lena, who laughed and said, "She loves purple." She turned to Clara with the easy generosity of someone who didn't have to prove her worth. "Would you like to see where she keeps her drawings? She's very proud." Clara swallowed and nodded. Her composure returned like a patchwork stitched together too fast. She followed them into the living room, hands still shaking. I stood by the table, watching them move around my life as if they'd always belonged. My jaw tightened once. I let it go. When the plates were cleared, Clara finally found her voice. It was small. Broken, maybe. I thought, she started, then stopped. She folded her hands in her lap as if to hold herself together. "You thought you could come back and pick up where we left off?" I offered. "No," she whispered. "I thought you'd forgive me." The words landed where words like that land, clumsy and too heavy. "I don't need forgiveness," I told her. "Forgiveness is for people who want to be close again. I don't want that." My voice stayed even. I watched her face, the way shame and regret warred for space there. "Thank you, though." "For what?" Her lip trembled. "For teaching me how to be alone," I said. The sentence surprised me with its crispness. I hadn't rehearsed it, it came out clean and clear. "You sent me away. You taught me to stand without you." That skill, bitter as it was, made everything I have now possible. She closed her eyes. A single, quiet sob escaped her. It was the sound of a person who had been trying to buy back time with apologies. I could have done something cruel. A flourish. A revelation of receipts and property deeds, a dramatic reveal to show I'd owned the land for months, that I'd watched her fall from the safety nets she'd once taken for granted. I could have said something that would crush her entirely. But I hadn't built my life on breaking people. So I remained calm. Polite. Distant in a way that carried more weight than any accusation. "You were always good at looking like you belonged," I said finally. "You were better at pretending than I could ever be." I admired that, once. She opened her eyes. Are you mocking me?" "No," I stood. The room was small, and the light through the window made everything look softer. "I'm simply telling the truth. We grew in different directions while you waited. Different lives." I looked at Iris, whose chubby hand grasped the corner of the sofa. "I built a life that doesn't need patching. It thrives." Clara pressed her palms to her eyes. How could you? You sent me away to make yourself proud of me," I said. "You wanted a better version of me to come back. I became that man. But I did it for me. For my daughter. For the woman who loved me when I was still raw." She laughed then, an ugly sound that dissolved into tears. "I waited," she said again. "I really did." I stepped closer, slowly, not to wound, but to finish whatever loop remained open. "Waiting is not the same as keeping faith," I said. "Waiting is a choice. So is leaving. Both are honest. But neither obligates the other." She rose, staggering like a ship listing and righting itself at the same time. "Please," she begged in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it. "I thought, if you came back, if you forgave me." "You don't get to decide what I forgive you for," I said quietly. "You can ask. You can apologize. That's your work. But forgiveness is my gift to give, and I have given it. I forgave what I needed to forgive so I could move on." I won't hold on to what hurts me. I won't drag it to dinner with my family. Clara's shoulders slumped. She turned to leave. At the doorway she paused, looking back as if hoping some miracle might rewind the years. Iris waved at her, to the stranger in the room, and called out, "Bye. Thanks for looking at my drawing." Clara stumbled back into the night like someone who had been given the wrong map. When the door closed, the house seemed, for a moment, too quiet. Lena moved to put away a dish, humming softly. Iris climbed onto my lap and pressed the drawing into my hands. "Papa," she murmured around a mouthful of crayons. "Do you like purple?" I looked down at my daughter, the warmth of her skin, the steady rise and fall of her chest. I didn't feel vindictive. I felt full. Whole. I said to Clara, though she couldn't hear me, because she didn't need to, I said it for myself, to close the last hollow place she'd left behind. "Thank you," I whispered into the kitchen air. "For teaching me how to be alone." It lasted a long time, her footsteps walking away, the soft scrape of the gate. Outside, her silhouette melted into the dusk. Inside, my daughter chatted about colors, oblivious, and that made all the difference. She had waited. I had lived. That night, after the door closed behind her, the house grew quiet again. The kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore, just breathes. I stood by the window, watching the tail lights fade into the countryside road. The same road I once walked barefoot with empty hands and a heart full of promises. The same one I took 7 years ago when she said, "It'll only be for a while." I thought I'd come full circle, but the truth was simpler than that. Circles are for those who keep chasing their starting point. I wasn't chasing anymore. Lena was humming softly in the kitchen, her voice carrying over the clinking of dishes. Iris had already fallen asleep on the couch, her tiny hand still clutching the crayon drawing she'd shown to Clara. I walked over, lifted her gently, and felt her breathing against my chest, steady, sure, and real. That was the life Clara said I needed to earn. That was the proof she once demanded I show. But I never needed to prove anything. Not anymore. I looked outside one last time. The moonlight spilled across the old field, the same field I used to till with bare hands, dreaming of her approval. It gleamed silver now, peaceful, owned by no memory but my own. "She once sent me away to learn how to be worthy of her love," I said quietly, not to anyone, just to the wind that carried her ghost away. I did. I looked back at the sleeping child in my arms, at the home that had grown around the ashes of my youth. But by the time I came back, I whispered, letting the last words fall like the softest verdict. I'd learned something greater, how to live without it. The lights dimmed, the world stilled, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free.